have you noticed with like clients, right? Because I feel I have, I don't know, my caseload, right? And so I definitely have clients that are at different, not everyone grew up religious, right? I have clients that grew up more conservative. I have clients that grew up more reform. That doesn't matter the faith, right? And people come to different places of wanting to still be religious or still have faith and be queer, and other points of like that I can never be Christian again, or I can never be Jewish again, I can never be Mormon, like fill in the blank, right? Because I've been so hurt by blank, the church, the temple, the this, the right, the mosque. And people are at all stages of that. And I don't always think the answer is to go back to faith. I really want to respect people's agency. Do you see a theme in practice, like with clients that you work with that have just like said, I can't go back to church, or I can't go back to temple, or like, is there a theme that comes up for you that you see with clients that are struggling with those things?
Yeah. I mean, there's so many different approaches that folks can take, just like you said. For the person who says like, I'm out, I'm never looking back. Like I have no, like, I completely respect that, because it's like, here's this context where you have been traumatized repeatedly, chronically, potentially for your whole life. And why do I even owe that organization or that group of people or that belief system the time of day? Like I'm out. So
Absolutely.
That makes sense to me. I've actually been surprised more the other way, just how many people still do want some tie or want to see if it's possible. And one thing that does strike me often is how much folks tend to think it's one or the other, right? Either I kind of fall in line with this beliefs, the entire belief system, including the harmful narratives, rules, etc., or I throw the whole thing out and I can go over here and live my life. But it tends to, like, the idea, like, and I never want to tell people what their religious beliefs can or should be, but just kind of like, when folks are in this, like, I guess I have to do this or that, and I'm not sure because I like some things here, but other things there and all that. And I'll just kind of gently propose, like, does it have to be one or the other? And for how many people, it just sort of feels like, what do you mean? Like, what would that, is that a thing? And, it's not for me to say, here's how to, here's what it is. But even just helping people realize, like, there exists a community of people for whom, they're out and proud, identifying as LGBTQ, and feel a very strong tie to their faith. Now, the faith narrative is not the same one then, right? You have to take a closer look at that and say, does this narrative actually make sense? Is this how it should be? But that's often just really illuminating for a lot of folks. And that doesn't mean that everyone now goes down this set path.
But you're right, because that's exactly what I was going to say. Because I think some of it to me is like, people come in, I can never go back, right? And you're right. Like, I want to respect that people are different stages within their healing process, but I don't think people also realize there's an option to hold both, right? I think it's one or the other. And you're right, maybe I can't go back to the conservative space, but I think there's something to be said, like, even in the beginning of this conversation, you talked about like how much some of that community did mean to you and how it did probably save your life, right? And so I wouldn't want to think I can just toss all of that out, right? I think it is really important. I think that there's a sense of community within queer spaces, there's a sense of community within faith-based spaces. And I don't think everyone wants to lose both, is what and I don't think everyone has to, I think is kind of what you're saying. And you're right, it did save your life. And I can only assume parts of those, I understand that there's traumatic and triggering things that go on in conservative spaces, but there are probably other things that people carry with them that are good things throughout their life, of like love and caring, nurture. I think you're right. I can only imagine people's face of like, what do you mean I can have both? Like, that can't be possible.
Yeah. It's all like almost, if it hasn't already been presented to somebody outside of, my session with them where it's coming up, it is almost this like a loss for words moment that happens for most people. Like, wait, what?
No,
like,
you're right.
All right. It's just, and maybe like me early on in my journey, kind of like re-questioning my faith and everything. This, like, I don't know that those podcasts or those books or those just people are out there that I could just go find and see how they're doing it or how they understand things. You can do a Google search now and look for it, but maybe you don't even know that there's a thing out there that you can search for.
Absolutely.
So yeah, it's just really interesting how it's just so outside of the bubble that it's disruptive almost.
Do you think that comes, and I mean, this is just kind of one correlation, but I don't know if it's 100%, but I think there may be something to be said, like from that theme that has often been talked about of like us versus them, right? Of only being able to hold one or the other. Do you think that there's a possibility, right? Because we've kind of discussed this idea of, like, I grew up in a pretty reformed Jewish environment. I wouldn't necessarily say I saw a lot of queer folk, not a lot of like women in power, but male assigned at birth and female assigned at birth carried the same level. Like, you weren't separated at temple. You had access to things. You could ask questions. It was very, very liberal. But I also can say that once I really embraced who I was and am, I definitely saw it as like queer religious. And I didn't even grow up with a lot of religion in the way that like you did and other people that I've worked with and friends and family, right? Like, I grew up pretty liberal for that time period. Obviously struggled with sexuality, but not in the way I think a lot of people that are conservative are. But I hope society, Judaism, friends, who knows? But once I really embraced who I am, I definitely did the us versus them, like pretty strong. Like, oh, I can't go to a church, or they're not going to allow me in there, or I can't go back to temple. I can't go this. I can't explore this. They hate me, right? They think I should burn in blank, right? It still probably pops up in my head, to be honest.
Sure.
In all transparency, it doesn't mean it's correct. I allow the thought to exist, right? And I'm just curious, like, that, to me, that's a very similar narrative. Like, when you talked about like growing up in a conservative space, was there a lot of like us versus them? Like, they don't like me, or they don't love me, or they hate me, like fill in the blank kind of a thing? I'm assuming yes.
Yeah. Well, and it kind of goes both ways, right? This like, even if you want in on the group, right, that the group may not like you back.
Sure.
So accepting. But yeah, that was absolutely a promoted idea. This kind of like, not only do we sort of have the right way figured out, and those other people out there kind of just, they're missing out. They have it wrong, but it's this like this enemy picture, right? Versus like, okay, I have this perspective. And of course, if anyone who has an opinion wants to at least hope that their opinion is right, or else you wouldn't be your opinion or your belief, or, right. This like, I'm trying my best. This is my belief system. But there isn't this kind of mutual understanding, at least not in the circle that I grew up in, but like, oh, other people have their own perspectives too, that they arrived at from their own process and educating themselves, or whatever avenues they have to, right? They're just been handed to them, just like it was handed to me, right? This,
you're right.
This kind of compassion of like, it makes sense that we arrive at different perspectives. It's very much like, oh, those people who are kind of closed-minded or closed off, which now, of course, I see you laughing probably for the same, in retrospect, it's like, we're the ones that are closed off.
Yes, but also like, right, I grew up in a pretty liberal environment, and I still have that belief, right? And like I said, the more I embraced my sexuality and my gender expression, the more I was like, they're the enemy, right? And so even without growing up the way you did, I still had the like, they're the enemy. They're the enemy. They don't like me because this, right? And I definitely don't like them. There was no like, oh, we can have a conversation, or maybe they don't think about this. Like, it was very much like a complete divide between me and them.
Yeah.
And it's a lonely place to sit, I think, for a lot of people, which makes sense when we've talked about kind of the idea of like